Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we tackle some tasks in my garden. So let's go. The weather has finally started to cool down and there is so much to be done in the garden. In fact, it can sometimes feel a little overwhelming. Do you feel that same way when it comes to your garden? Well, what I found that works for me is putting together a very small, manageable list and trying to tackle whatever is on that list. I recently made a video talking a little bit more about that, and I'll put a link to that video down in the description below. But what I found in the comments was that some of you also like to write down your list on a piece of paper when it comes to gardening chores, whereas others actually keep a list on their phone. And then there are many people that don't have a list, they don't know where to start, and that this video gave you some ideas and some inspiration. In fact, many of you shared with me that you liked that format of a video and you wanted me to make more videos like that. I was so happy because it helped me with getting chores done in my own garden that I woke up super early this morning, I put down my list, and I'm ready to share it with you. So this is what I have on my list for this morning. The first thing I want to do is I have some heuchera or coral bells, and the blooms on them have gone by. They're spent and they're ready to be cut back. In fact, they probably should have been cut back weeks ago, but that's beside the point. I'm ready to get them cut back, so we're going to do that together. And I put some notes in here just as reminders to me of things to talk about during the video, so I'll address those. The second thing I wrote down was digging up 5 sea holly, and then I continued writing things on my list. But I found that I want to follow a certain sequence of events. In other words, there's sea holly that I need to dig up and pot up, but I need potting mix. So in order to get the potting mix, after we cut back the heuchera blooms, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to empty out some pots of dahlia tubers. That's going to give me some potting mix. And then we're going to make our potting mix with some soil that I have. And I'll talk more about that later. So that will be the third thing we'll tackle. That will give me some potting mix and soil mixture that will allow me to pot up my sea holly. So we'll do that together for step number 4. And then we want to do something simple and easy because that's a little bit tedious right there. So we'll take it a little easy and we're going to cut back or deadhead my snapdragon blooms. And then finally, we're going to do some more deadheading, and that has to do with the dahlia blooms. So without further ado, let's get started. Right near the front of my house, which is the west side of my house, is a very sunny but also shady area of my yard. It's a mixture. And right towards the front of this area, I have a whole bunch of coral bells or heuchera tucked in here. It looks so pretty, I feel, towards the front of this area. And as I look at this area, the first thing I notice is I have some hosta blooms right over here that have gone by. But that was not on our list. I'm not even going to worry about it. I'm going to pretend like I never saw that. But what I am looking at, and I'm showing you, are all the spent blooms on all these coral bells or heuchera. You can see there are so many. And I want to take you in for a closer look just so you can see what they look like. They don't look very good. And we want all these plants that are at the base of them, the actual coral bell plants themselves, to look pretty. So this is just a different angle. And I'm going to walk you along because I want you to see what I'm talking about when I say that there are a lot of spent blooms along here. These are things that when I'm doing a garden tour, you might not even notice, you might not see. But in my garden, I see this and I've been looking at this every single day for the last many weeks. And you may ask, Vita, why haven't you cut them back yet? Well, just like you know, life happens, right? And we get overwhelmed with all the tasks in our garden, which is a big reason why I'm setting out this goal for myself to pick a task or two and start it and finish it and not worry about all the other things nearby that need to be done. For example, a stilby that's gone by and needs to be cut back. I'm not going to worry about those blooms that need to be cut back. We're just going to stay focused. We have a lot of work ahead of us. And if we skip over this plant here, you can see there are more coral bells. And when I worked in this space, I focused on this space and I cut back the blooms here. And then as we continue on, the next space I didn't work on. And that means I have more heuchera or coral bell blooms that need to be cut back. This is a pretty big job. And this is what I'm talking about. It's It's so important to just stay focused on one task and just get it done. So we're almost nearing the end of Heuchera Valley, as I'll call it here. But see, there's more. It's like the never-ending task, but it is going to end. It's going to end today. So let's get started. I wanted to thank you all for your words of encouragement. I feel like maybe I'm encouraging you, but also just know that you're encouraging me. And I really, truly appreciate you, and I want you to know that. Being out here today makes me really happy to be able to show you not only what am I working on in my garden, but also to show you that just like you, I'm just an average gardener trying to do garden chores that also can sometimes not know where to start or where to end. But I think it's important to show these areas of the garden because our gardens are always work in progress, no matter who we are, no matter how big our gardens are. And it doesn't matter where we live. Many of us live in all different parts of the world, but yet we share many things alike. First of all, we share the interest or the hobby of gardening, and that's what brings us all together. But then also we share interests in plants. We have plants that like sun or shade, but then we also share struggles like insect pressure, or that we are having a drought, or we're having too much rain. And it's so nice that we're able to share that information or those feelings down in the comments section. I'm always reading the comments. I try my best to write back to you, let you know what I'm thinking, or I love to hear about what you're going through in your gardens. But when I was taking this video just now of showing you all these coral bells, even I was a little like, oh wow, I have a lot of coral bells that need to be cut back. But it's okay. Even if it doesn't matter how long it takes me, it doesn't matter if I have to take breaks in between. I want to get this job done, and I'm going to feel so good when I get it done. And as I was taking that video, not only did I notice this hosta that's behind me that needed to be cut back, I noticed other hosta along the way that needed to be cut back. I noticed a whole slew of things that needed to be done. And it's taken me a while, I have to be honest, but I was okay with that. I was not allowing myself to feel overwhelmed. I did a few days ago when I was down in my plant nursery. I was going to go down there and I was going to work in there. And for lots of different reasons, my plant nursery became very weedy this year. So it felt very overwhelming. And that was the day that I said, I'm going to make a list and I'm going to just tackle some things and I'm going to feel good about being out in my garden. And what a difference it made me feel to just do that. Do I still have a whole bunch of weeds in my plant nursery? I do, but it's okay. Maybe one day we can tackle that together, and that might motivate me, and it might motivate you as well. Even if you don't have a plant nursery, you might have an area that you just keep walking by and it's just way overwhelming. And if I tackle that area in the plant nursery, it might motivate you to tackle that same type of area. There's all these rules when it comes to gardening, I feel like. As soon as your coral bells go by, the minute they go by, cut back the blooms. But if the whole season went by and you didn't cut them back, it's okay. Come springtime, those spent blooms will still be there. You can cut them back then. So don't worry about all these rules. Do what makes you happy. That's how I feel anyway. When it comes to cutting back these blooms, I am noticing that there are a very small handful of coral bells that still have flowers on them. And seeing that it's taken me this long to cut back these spent blooms, at this point, it's all or nothing. In other words, even if there's a few blooms left, they're going to get cut back at this time. Because my reality is I'm not going to come back out here and cut those back. So it's better for me to just go ahead and cut everything back now. But again, in your garden, if you want to leave a few blooms and enjoy them, absolutely, you can do that. That's the beauty of gardening, is there really is no right or wrong. I'm just following each spent bloom down to the base. And that's how I'm going ahead and pruning back or deadheading the coral bells. The other thing I'm doing is I'm cutting each of these flower stalks into smaller pieces for a few reasons. The biggest reason is they're going to get added to my compost pile and they're going to break down faster. But not only that, since I have a small bucket here, 5-gallon bucket, it's just, I can fit a lot more in there if I have the spent blooms and flower stalks cut back into smaller pieces. The reason I have so many coral bells in my yard is because I've been dividing them almost on a yearly basis. And I've mentioned that before in videos, that the name of the game is to divide and move. And the more you divide your perennials, the more free plants you can have for your garden. It seems like this specific coral bell right here is actually continuing to push out blooms, which is really neat. I can see a bloom starting to come up here. I'm not going to cut that back. It's just a little flower bud there, so I'll leave it for now. This is so hard, seeing things like these little weeds and ignoring them. I think what I'll do is, on a different day, part of my task, garden task, will be to come out here and weed. And then when I weed, I can cut these guys back that need to be cut back. I see grass in here that needs to be pulled. But again, I want to just stay focused on what we're doing. And perhaps on a different day, if you like, we can come out here and we can weed this particular area. And then you can work on an area that you need to weed. Let me know in the comments if you want to do that. We can have a weeding day. Because right now I'm just focused on cutting back certain plants. I'm torn on cutting back some of these plants that are still blooming. But again, there's no right or wrong. It's whatever works best for you. You can divide your heuchera really any time of the year, but a lot of times you want to be doing it either in the spring or the fall. And it's a very easy plant to propagate from division or even just from basal pieces or cuttings. So if you want to make more heuchera plants and you've never done it before, check out the link down in the description where I show you my process for dividing the heuchera plant. I've never collected the seeds of heuchera. I'm sure it's possible. So you can always check to see if there are seeds on your plants. And then in that case, you may not want to be doing what I'm doing in terms of deadheading. But honestly, if you have heuchera plants in your yard and you just want to make more of them, I feel like it's so easy to just divide it. I always use the words interchangeably because honestly, I can't just say coral bells all the time. It's just so easy for me to also say heuchera. But one thing that might happen to your heuchera plants is in the spring, you might notice that they're basically coming out of the ground. And that can happen after the winter months, that they're basically heaving out of the ground. And in order to fix that problem, what you need to do is just dig up the plant. It's a great time at that point, if you're going to dig it up, to divide it. But then you just want to plant the plants a little bit deeper so that their roots are not sticking out of the ground, or so that the base is not sticking out of the ground. And that just happens over time after a winter of the freeze-thaw cycle that happens in the ground. So I'm going to turn the camera off at this time, and I'm just going to go to town. I'm going to continue cutting back my heuchera plants. I'm going to ignore the noise that I see around them. And when I say noise, again, that means the weeds and any other deadheading, anything else that is noise, I'm going to ignore, and I'm going to get this job done. And when I'm all done, I'll turn the camera back on and I'll show you how everything looks. I must say, we did good. We really did good. So much cleaner. And again, when I bring you down to this level, even though the sun is starting to shine a little bit, you can see just how much nicer it looks with those spent blooms being cut. It makes me really happy because this area from a distance didn't look too shabby, but when I came close up to it and I looked at all those spent blooms that were hanging over the lawn, especially when the lawn would get cut, then it just looked so messy. And I'm glad I'm coming in closer to show you this, because I noticed I forgot to cut this one back. And we're just going to do that right now. I'll just come in and I can use my fingers and just snip this back. and done. But boy, what a difference that made just to clean that up. What do you think? I see you, Astilbe. You're going to be on my next list, I think. And I'm just going to skip around here because we had already tackled this in a previous project. And then right after, in this area here, is where I continued with cutting back the spent blooms. And again, there are so many things that are always need to be done in our garden, like deadheading and pruning, weeding. But if you just pick small little projects like this, you just feel so good about yourself. You feel a sense of accomplishment. And I think that's where making a list really helps. Cutting back the Heuchera blooms, done. I tell you, the power of checking something off on a list is such a great feeling. So we're going to skip the sea holly for right now because we're going to go to number 2. And that is Dahlia tubers. I'm going to show you what I mean. There are a number of plants here that you're looking at. This is what I call one of my many rolling carts. It's a small little rolling cart. And these were plants that I had intended to get out in my landscape this year. And just like you, I didn't get to them. You might have had only one plant, and you can see I have many. There are many plants here that I started from seed, but we're not going to worry about all the different plants that are on here. I want to stay focused with the Dahlia tubers. We started tackling this in my previous video that I made where we tackled some garden chores. So we're going to continue on with it. Long story short, there are some Dahlia tubers that are on here that I overwintered in my garage. And I have videos that talk all about dahlias and overwintering them, collecting seeds, dividing them. I'm going to put links to those videos down in the description. Basically, these Dahlia tubers are never going to make it in the landscape. And rather than cry over spilt milk or cry over jobs that do not get done, we're just going to keep plugging forward. We're going to take the Dahlia tubers that are here, not all of them because there are many. We're going to pick at least 10 and we're going to empty out the pots. And while I'm emptying out the pots, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it, but pretty quickly because some of you have already seen that previous video. So let's get started. We're in my barn and I mean, it's messy behind me, but I know that you understand. We all have messy areas of our yard or our house. It's all good. So we're going to start with this dahlia right here, and it's in a container pot, a very small container pot, and I had pre-sprouted a whole bunch of dahlias to basically wake them up. Here, where I live in New Hampshire Zone 5B, we have a shorter growing season than many other people, and in order to get the most productivity or blooms out of certain plants that are not hardy here, like dahlias, it makes sense to wake them up, to pre-sprout those tubers so that they can go in the ground and they can start flourishing quicker. Well, they stayed in my pre-sprouting pots all summer long. Not all my dahlias. Some of them did make it in the landscape, but some of them did not. And the ones that did not make it in the landscape, like this one here, I just kept watered during a very dry, very hot, humid summer. And I kept them alive. I kept them limping along. And here we are now, end of August, early September. And at this point, they're never going to make it in the landscape. So I'm going ahead and I'm cutting back their foliage to start with. Normally you want to wait until a frost has hit them. But I can tell you that I've done this process before, cut the foliage back early. I don't like to do it, but at this point, it doesn't really matter. These bulbs are not going to get that much more energy. In fact, they're in these pots here. They're not happy. They need to come out of it. So since I have so many plants in my yard that I like to overwinter, it just makes sense to start tackling this job now. It's one less thing I have to do later. So let me go ahead and take the tubers out of this pot. And I'm putting them in this tote here because it just makes it easier to take the soil off of the tubers. I did stop watering these about 3 or 4 days ago, so they're nice and dry. And the reason I'm taking the soil off of the tubers is I prefer to store my tubers this way. Some people store their tubers inside of their pots, and I think that method works great if you only have a small handful of tubers. But I have lots and lots of dahlia tubers, so for me it makes more sense to take them out of their pots, Plus, the pots that they were in were very small pots. Again, they were just meant to pre-sprout or wake up these tubers. There are so many different ways you can overwinter dahlia tubers. Although where you live, it might be warm enough that you're lucky and you can keep your tubers in the ground all year long. I've been calling this type of video my garden fitness plan. And I mentioned in a previous video that it's similar to like being in the gym where you're putting together a list of exercises that you want to do. And in this case, these are gardening exercises, and they're not meant to be a physical exercise. They're just meant to be a list of things that I want to get done and accomplish. And I'm putting together a list of things that I feel are manageable, that are not overwhelming. I'm trying to put together this list where I'm not going to just give up. After the first day, I put together such a hard list that I'm done. I throw in the towel and I'm not even going to do this anymore. I don't want to do that when it comes to my gardening. So instead, my list is manageable. It's small. I can always take something off my list. I can always add something to my list. And that's the beauty of it. So the list that I put together was something that I'm going to try to get done in about a couple of hours today because I have other things going on. And then later on, I can put together another list. Some days, these chores will be pretty easy. And then other days, the chores will be harder. And maybe then my list won't be so big. So it really just depends on my schedule for the day and what else I have going on. There are definitely things in my yard that will be done on a constant basis. And some examples of that might be potting up the seedlings of plants that have gone rogue and wild in my yard. And I don't like to just throw away plants. I like to keep as many plants as possible. So I'll be showing you later in this video what I mean about that. But those are tasks that are going to be ongoing. But something like this is also ongoing. It does have an endpoint. I'll eventually not have any more dahlias in pots. But it's not something that I want to do all in one day. I think that's too overwhelming for me. So one of my goals is to try to do just 10 dahlia tuber pots a day. And we already did that in a previous video. So for today, the goal is 10 more, take out 10 more dahlias out of their pots. So one is done. And what I'm planning to do is just show you little snippets of what I'm working on and why I'm working on it. And then I'll turn off the camera and it's just faster for me to just plow through it and get it done. And I also don't want to repeat myself if I've already said a lot of this in the previous video. So what I'll do is put a link to that video down below in case you missed it, where I did the same process, but I talked a little bit about other things. And if I miss anything that I wanted to discuss, I can always talk about it in a video like today's video. But for right now, I can't think of anything else I want to talk about when it comes to dahlias. So just again, check the playlist out because it talks a lot about dahlias and caring for dahlias. But I'm going to turn the camera off and I'm just going to get the rest of this job done. So we ended up with some free potting mix that even though it's used, we can reuse it for a different project. All of the tops that I cut off of the dahlias, I cut up in smaller pieces and that's going to get added to my compost pile. When it comes to all the container pots, it's kind of like being in the kitchen. I like to just pot up everything or nest all the pots inside of each other just because why make a mess? It just makes it easier. I can now put away those pots and reuse them. And then all the dahlia tubers are in this little tray that I got for free from a friend of mine. And I'm going to let them dry for a few days before I store them away for the winter. And then on my little rolling rack, I consolidated the rest of the dahlias that need to get emptied out of their pots. I'm so happy. There aren't many left. And, you know, I'm going to be honest with you. I almost kept going because I saw that I don't have many left. And these are just little small ones left. And then I reminded myself, no, I have other things that were on my list. These can be handled on a different day. So I'm just going to place the tubers next to the other tubers that we worked on previously. In a different video, I will show you my process on how I go ahead and store these for the winter, because these ones here are good and dry, and they don't need to be 100% dry, but they're dry enough that they can be stored. But we'll do that together on a different day. That'll be on our list, and I can't wait to show you how I do that. Here's my compost pile. So we can go ahead and just add our dahlia tuber clippings in there. If there was disease on them, I wouldn't be doing this. I would be putting them in the trash, but they were perfectly fine. And in case you want to know more about my composting system and how I compost, I'll put a link to that playlist down in the description below. So dahlia tubers, let's go ahead and mark that done. And for right now, we're going to skip over the potting mix and the sea holly. The reason is my husband's about to mow the lawn, which is over where the snapdragon and dahlias are that we're going to deadhead. Let's go tackle that quickly. We're back at the front of the house, and this is what is my front walkway. It's packed with lots of different annuals and perennials. We actually came in here and we had deadheaded the coleus just to tidy things up. There are so many different jobs to be done in this area, just like other areas of the yard. But for today, we're going to keep it focused again. So in container pots, there are some dahlias, and there are a number of container pots here. But before I go over that, I want to go over the snapdragons. Based on my zip code, I could have a frost sometime in the next month, and I could just be done with my garden. But I want to keep my garden going for as long as I can, and I want to enjoy my flowers for as long as I can. After all, we work so hard in the spring to get our gardens looking beautiful. So why give up at this point? Why not just keep on going and seeing what happens? Many of my snapdragons have bloomed and have gone by. In other words, the flowers have faded. I've already come in here and deadheaded my snapdragons before, but that's just an ongoing task that needs to happen. So we'll be coming in and we will be cutting back or deadheading the spent blooms on our snapdragons here. And in some cases, nothing needs to happen because you can see right here that I had already deadheaded these snapdragons on a previous date, so we're just going to leave those alone. Whereas right here, this is an example of something we would be coming in and deadheading or cutting back. Right behind it are some very sad looking dahlias. They didn't do well this year. I'm not sure if it's because they got too much water. It could be. They might have gotten too much water. It happens. The big thing is we will be coming in and deadheading the dahlias. On a different day, I am also going to come in and just turn off or pull out the drip irrigation in each of these container pots just to give the dahlia tubers a chance to breathe. I was very diligent for a long time about deadheading the dahlias, but you know how it is. I just stopped doing it, and at this point, it just needs to happen. There are some pretty blooms still on them, but there are many, many blooms that have gone by. Look how sweet that is. I just love that. It's early in the morning, and the little bees are taking a nap. So let's get to work. And I just want to pan around before we start. So there are dahlias that are in these container pots here. And then pretty much all along my walkway, there are dahlias in container pots, but then there are a whole bunch of snapdragons. So anywhere we see dahlias or snapdragons, we will be doing some deadheading or cutting back. We will continue to ignore anything else that needs to happen in here because the list could just keep on going. We could say that the alyssum looks ratty and needs to be trimmed, and same with the trailing lobelia here at the front of the bed. We're going to ignore all that, and we're just going to stay focused on what needs to happen based on our list that we made today. A question that I got asked in my previous video where I was cutting back the coleus was, what if I wanted to collect the seeds? Would I still be cutting back these spent blooms? And the answer is no. If you want to collect the seeds from certain plants, it could be an annual, perennial, it could be an herb, it could be a vegetable, then you don't want to be deadheading. You want to let that plant go to seed so you can collect the seeds from it. The key is knowing when to stop deadheading, because if it was early in the season, then at that point you want to be deadheading because you want your plant to keep blooming for you. But there is that certain time late in the season, and it's going to vary depending on where you live. Where I live, it would be right now because our temperatures are getting quite cold. And like I said, I could get a frost within the next month. So at that point, if I wanted to collect the seeds from any given plant, then I would not want to be deadheading it. I could partially deadhead it and leave a few of the spent blooms on there and let those few spent blooms go to seed. But To be honest with you, I have so many seeds saved from a lot of these plants. And when it comes to dahlias specifically, well, I showed you already, I have so many tubers that I need to overwinter. So it doesn't make sense for me to collect the seeds, but I have collected the seeds before, and I have made videos showing you my process on collecting dahlia seeds, as well as coleus seeds, and even today we're going to be deadheading the snapdragons. I also have videos showing how to collect the seeds from snapdragons, as well as videos on how to start all these seeds indoors. So I'll put links to those below because I think it's important in case you want to know how to do any of that. It's important for me to put links to those videos because I do have videos that show how to do it. I just, for the sake of this video, and because I don't care to collect the seeds right now, I'm doing the deadheading job. But it is possible to collect the seeds, and I encourage you to do it. It's a great way to save money. That's how I start a lot of my plants, is from seeds that I've collected, not from seeds that I bought. Another question that I get asked is, when you collect the seeds of plants, will they come true to the parent plant because of the whole cross-pollination and all that business? And it comes down to the plant that you're collecting the seeds from. If you're collecting the seeds from a plant that's some sort of a cross or a hybrid, then it will not produce, it may produce seeds, but the seeds that you plant and the plant that gets sprouted from those seeds may not look identical to the parent plant. But what I will share about that whole thing is, as a home gardener, that doesn't bother me. I love making my own creation of plants, especially with dahlias. So if I get some sort of a funky flower that I created myself, that's so fun. My experience has been, typically though, when I collect my own seeds, the plants look really nice, very pretty, and they look pretty close to the parent plant. However, if you're collecting the seeds from a plant that states that it's an heirloom plant, then in that case, it will produce seeds that are plants that will be identical to the parent plant. So that's something to just keep in mind. Another question I get asked when it comes to seed saving is, what if you pull off something that's green in terms of a seed pod? Will it then turn brown and produce viable seeds? And my advice is, don't do that. Make sure that you're waiting for the seed pod to ripen on the plant before you pull it off. So again, I'm not going to go into opening this up and showing you the seeds. I'd rather you watch the video that I made. But you want to wait until the seed pods, no matter what plant it is, are ripened on the plant itself. You don't want to be collecting it and then waiting for it to ripen, because there's a high likelihood that the seeds that get produced, if they even get produced, will not be viable. For deadheading my plant, I'm going to leave this alone because that's an example of a flower. It's still opening up, so we want to enjoy that. And here's another beautiful flower. Sometimes it can be tricky though when it comes to deadheading. What is a flower bud that's gone by and what is a flower bud that you want to leave? So right in here, that's an example of a flower bud we're going to leave. And these right here are also examples of flower buds. This one might open in a few days. It has a little color. And this one right here, it'll take a few more days for it to open up. So different stages and sizes of flower buds that I'm showing you here. I'm just going to point on the screen flower buds that have gone by, that are ones that are spent, and I want to cut them off because if I don't cut them off, it's going to tell the plant to go to seed, and I don't want the plant to go to seed. But then I'm also now pointing on the screen any flower buds that I'm going to leave alone because I want those to open up and to bloom for me. Look at this little bee working that flower. After I'm all done cleaning up, deadheading the dahlias, I'll show you what comes next when it comes to the snapdragons. Here's a beautiful snapdragon that's still blooming, and I don't want to touch it because I want to enjoy the blooms for as long as I can. And I still have some more blooms left on this snapdragon here. I'm going to leave them alone. But right nearby, you can see that we have some spent blooms here. And see that little piece sticking out over there? That's an example of another spent bloom. And there are some buds here on the top, but at this point, I would much rather just cut this back and have the plant put its energy into producing more flower buds and more blooms. And this one here just has a few flower buds on the top, but it looks okay, so we're just going to leave this alone. We're going to leave this one alone as well. In terms of how far to cut this down, it's really up to you. It's a personal preference. If you want a shorter, bushier plant, you could go down as far as possible. But if you wanted some taller stems, you don't have to cut it down so far. Maybe you're trying to use it for cut flowers. Then you could just cut it just below where it bloomed, like right here. I prefer to cut the plants down a little bit shorter, only because I want a shorter, bushier plant. I'm not growing these for an arrangement in a cut flower, and I'm just trying to cut above a set of leaves. This one we're going to leave alone because it has a bloom on it. I don't want to lose the bloom. But this one here, we're going to go ahead and cut back. And since I have so many seeds already saved up for snapdragons, I'm not going to be collecting any more right now. I have some more deadheading to do, and after I'm all done, I'll show you how everything looks. Well, that task is done. I'm so glad because we still have time left, and I don't want to give up on my plants yet. I want to enjoy them. So all of the dahlias have been deadheaded. And again, the leaves of the dahlias don't look great. I'm not sure why. So I did pull off the rings of irrigation on them in case they were getting too much water. And we'll see. And then I'll just also give them a good dose of fertilizer and see if that helps. Although I have been diligent about fertilizing my annuals on a weekly basis. So other than cutting back or deadheading all of the dahlias, I also came in and deadheaded all of the snapdragons. I'm just bringing you on the other side of the bed here, just so you can see a different angle of it. There's still work to be done in this area, again, just like other flower beds, but I tried to stay on task and just get this job done. It took a little bit, it took a little while to do it, but snapdragons like cooler weather, so why not deadhead them, right? We want to keep them going. And the dahlias look so pretty this time of year when they're blooming. So despite the fact that the foliage doesn't look very good on them, the plants just didn't do as well as they normally do, I'm still really happy that I even have any blooms on here. And with this one here, I'm noticing that this bloom is spent. So I can just come in here, follow it down, and then just snip that off. I might have missed a spent bloom here or there, and that happens, and that's okay. But for the most part, I got all the blooms cut back, and I'm so happy because I want to enjoy the space. I still have time left, and the flowers still have time left. We don't want to give up on them. Our garden still wants to produce for us. And I want to still be able to walk around my yard and just take it all in. By the way, quick update. Do you remember when we came in and we cut back our petunias really hard? They have come back, and I just love the way they're looking. They have filled in so nicely here up along the walkway. I've mentioned this before in videos that sometimes cutting back flowers is scary, but when you do it, the plants appreciate it. So don't be afraid sometimes when it comes to gardening. It's so worth it. It just extends our time that we can enjoy our plants. So I just wanted to give that quick update on the petunias that were cut back. Well, that was a big job, but it's going to pay off in the end. So we went ahead and we cut back the blooms off, or deadheaded the snapdragons. We also deadheaded the dahlias. And remember, if you want to collect the seeds from those plants, then you don't want to be doing as much deadheading as I'm doing. And check out the videos below that just show you the process for collecting the seeds, storing the seeds, and starting the seeds off of those two plants. And the final thing that we need to do is let's make up some potting mix, and then we're going to pot up 5 more sea holly. And I'm going to tell you why, because I don't think I've really talked too much about that in previous videos. On the south side of my house, I have what I call the long border. I also have a hydrangea hedge. At the end of the hydrangea hedge is my composting area, but it's also an area where I had a little bit of extra topsoil. It was a mixture of topsoil as well as some compost that was in a raised garden bed in my backyard. And I've been picking away at that pile, and I really want to use up the pile. So I've been going ahead and digging from that pile and mixing it with my used potting mix. Before you know it, the leaves will be falling. And I'll be very busy making up a new fresh batch of compost. So I really want to get rid of some of the piles that I have here in the backyard, including all of this very good soil. So I'm putting it to good use. I have a lot of potting up to do of plants because, as many of you know, I sell plants as part of my backyard plant nursery. So by taking this very good soil that's a little bit too heavy and mixing it with the used potting mix, I can use that to pot up plants that are seedlings in my yard as I'm cleaning up different beds. And all I'm doing is doing a 50-50 mixture of the used potting mix that's a little too fluffy, as well as this soil here that's a little too heavy, just to make it a nice, well-draining soil. So now I can just mix it up. I had shown this in my previous video, but I wanted to explain a little bit more about why I'm trying to use up the pile in this area. It's good material, it's good dirt, and I love reusing or recycling materials that I already have in my landscape for other purposes. And seeing that I need soil to pot up those sea holly seedlings that we're about to dig up, why buy it if I can already use what I have in my landscape? And then when I find roots like this, I can just pull them out. Also on the south side of my house is this flower bed that I like to call the side walkway flower bed. And it's called that because this is right next to what is my side walkway. I'm currently on a rock. There are two big rocks or boulders in the center of this bed. And what happened was a few years ago, I planted a nice sea holly plant that I bought bare root. I wasn't sure where to put it in my yard, so I just plunked it right here in this bed. And after that sea holly was done blooming, it went to seed and the seeds scattered and fell all around this bed. I didn't think much of it until the following year when suddenly I had a whole ton of sea holly seedlings scattered throughout here. Sea holly is very pretty, but it does have a deep taproot. And what that means is you just have to be careful when it comes to digging up that long taproot. So fast forward a few years and a bunch of those seedlings have gotten bigger. And it's been quite a process to dig out the seedlings. And someone asked me in a previous video, why don't I just leave all those seedlings in here? I'm trying to make this space a little bit more formal, and I would love to have sea holly in here, but I don't necessarily want a whole bunch of them. And I have them all around this rock, and there's really nothing to support those plants. So what I found is the sea holly blooms, it looks very pretty, but then it's just flopping all around this flower bed. It looks a little messy. I would prefer to have the sea holly on the south side of my house in the long border. In the long border, I have a whole ton of flowers out there. And what I think will happen is the sea holly will look a lot more beautiful out there because all of those flowers would support the weight of that plant so it's not flopping everywhere. So I've already shown you in a previous video or two my process for digging up and potting up the sea holly. So I'm going to be very quick today. I'm going to show you how I dig up one, and then I'm going to do 4 more. I'm going to continue doing that until all the sea holly around this rock are gone. But for today, we're only going to do 5. So even if I'm not going to show you this anymore in future videos because it's a repetitive thing, just know that I'll be making my own potting mix so that I can pot up the sea holly. I don't have space for all these sea holly plants around my yard, and that's why I'm going to be potting them up so they can go down in my plant nursery. I can sell some of them, and I'm just going to continue that. So let's go ahead and just dig up one together. You may read that plants that have a deep taproot should not be moved. But the reality is sometimes we just have to move plants. You can't just not move that plant just because it says you're not supposed to. This is a sea holly that is right next to this rock. It is not in an optimal place. It has to be moved. And not only that, this is a very large sea holly. So we are going to go after it. I'm going to use a large shovel. And what I want to do is I don't want to dig right at the base of the plant. I want to dig out a little bit. I'm going to dig down and then over. And I know that I'm not going to get all of the root. That is totally okay. As long as I get a part of the root, I will be fine. You normally want to be doing this in the spring or the late summer, early fall months. Let's see if we've loosened up the roots enough. And if not, we're going to keep on digging. Nope, we got to keep on digging. In previous videos, I've shown you my process for doing little tiny seedlings. I wanted to do one of the bigger ones together, just so you can do the same thing in your yard if you have a very big sea holly that you need to dig out. Perfect. And there's a very good chance that I left some of the root behind. As long as we have some root here, this plant will recover and will be wonderful for next season. It's going to replace the mulch. I'm just using a pot that I already had on hand. I love recycling and reusing things that I already have. And I do want to add sea holly to the long border, but that's not part of what I want to do today. So I'd rather just pot this up, and then on a different day, I can always shop my plant nursery. So for the leaves, I normally like to cut off the big leaves that are on the plant, but you'll see right now that there are no small leaves at the base here. If there were small leaves here, then I would go ahead and cut off some of the bigger leaves. I actually want to leave some of the leaves on here though, because the plant needs some leaves in order to photosynthesize. What I anticipate will end up happening is over the next 1 to 2 weeks, and one leaf already fell off, that's okay. Over the next 1 to 2 weeks, this plant will start sending out new leaves at the base. As soon as I see new leaves coming here at the base, I can cut off these top leaves because the top leaves are not happy, they don't look good, and I want the plant to put its energy into the roots. But I also don't want to remove all the leaves because it still needs some amount of leaves in order to photosynthesize. If I were to remove these leaves, trust me, this plant would still push out new growth anyway. It's not like the plant would just die and not do anything. And it's the end of the season here. I'm sure that this plant has enough energy in it to bloom and look beautiful for next year if I was to remove the leaves. There, perfect. Let me dig up 4 more. I ended up digging and potting up 8, which wasn't part of the plan. It was above and beyond, but I'm not going to complain. There was one area where a whole bunch of them were basically clumped together, and that's not good for the plant. So when I dug that area, I was able to divide it very easily. They just fell apart. When you think about it, if you buy a sea holly bare root in the stores, a lot of times all it has is a little bit of root. And that's basically what these are. In a way, these are almost like bare root. They don't have a ton of root to them. They have enough, and they're going to put on some growth for the next month, which is key. And then they're going to go dormant down in my plant nursery. Next year, they'll come back stronger than ever. This one here has some growth right in the center, so I'm going to remove some of the bigger leaves. In my plant nursery, I will be healing in these plants. And what that means is I'll be digging a nice long trench, and I will place each of these pots next to each other so they're huddled in. And then I will backfill with soil on all sides of the pots, basically this side as well as this side. But I want to leave the top part exposed, but all around it will be soil. So it's almost like I'm potting up, or I guess planting each of these plants in the ground, but they're in their pots. That protects the roots during our very cold winter months. I'm going to leave these leaves here as well as this one. All of these plants are going to push out new growth because they still have a good solid month at least of warm weather. I'll just make sure that they're still getting water. Potting mix done, and sea holly potting up is done as well. When it comes to our gardens, there are always chores to be done. Some of the chores are repetitive, some of the chores are new. It's up to you on how you want to chunk out those chores. Some of the chores that I showed you today are going to be repetitive. I'm probably not going to show them in future videos, such as continuing to make up my own potting soil or potting mix for potting up plants, as well as continuing to dig up all of those sea holly plants until I'm done. I'll keep deadheading my annuals until we get a frost, such as with the coleus, the dahlias, or the snapdragons. But then there's going to be some new chores that I'm going to add to my list. I'll keep bringing you along as I work in my gardens with the small projects as well as the bigger projects. Lots to be done, and it feels so good to be out in the garden. Let me know what you're working on in your garden, and until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.